This is the Speaking of Bikes podcast.
Hi, I'm Mark Reeve from In Good Taste, Creative and Communications.
And I'm Peter Abraham from the Abraham Studio. We're going to talk about the culture, tech, and economics of bicycles. All right, Mark, how you doing?
Good, Peter. How are you, man? Long week in Bentonville, huh?
Yeah, we were both there together, had a great week. We learned a lot. I'm so excited for today's podcast, which we recorded while we were in Bentonville. When did you first start going there?
First time I went there, I think I had dinner with you. First night I was there, I literally pulled up, got on my car, went to dinner, sort of uninvited. And there were a bunch of our friends there, and you happened to be there. And I was there for People for Bikes. I've gone always when they have events because, we love their mission and what they're up to and are trying to help them any way we can.
Yeah. And I remember that was at the Preacher's Son. I remember the place we ate. So Bentonville's an amazing place. I started going there in January 2020 when I worked on a USA cycling project with Tim Johnson, and it was his idea to bring us all down there. And I was immediately impressed with the place. And a couple of years later, I went back for Cyclocross World Championships. I've been to Big Sugar Gravel a number of times, and I would call it for sure the bike capital of North America right now. So I think it's an amazing place, and I can't wait to get into today's discussion.
Agreed. And the one thing I would add is, I've said this to you before, I thought that last year it was over. I thought Bentonville had grown as much as it was going to grow, and we were both at the same presentation where the husband of the governor said, no, we're going to double the population, I think, by 2030. And it was like, oh, they're just getting started. So if you think that you've missed Bentonville, you haven't missed it. It's still growing like crazy.
Yeah, and last week I got to take a tour of the chairlift served downhill mountain bike park. That's like 2 miles north of town. And it was just incredible, the level of execution and how nice it's going to be. And anyway, I'm so excited. So on today's podcast, we're going to talk to 3 people. We spoke with Tim Johnson, a mutual friend of ours, former pro cyclist who now lives in Bentonville, has a really great point of view. Who else did we talk to, Mark?
We talked to Scott King, who works for the Runway Group. I think this is his official employer, but he's a visionary in a lot of ways behind the bike infrastructure that's getting built in Bentonville.
That's right. He handles a lot of their new business initiatives. And the third guest on today's podcast is Aimee Ross, who has worked at the Runway Group a lot, but now she's taking over at Trailblazers, handling a lot of the sort of nonprofit investments into different cycling groups. I call Aimee the bike mayor of Bentonville. She's so plugged in there at so many levels. So, all right, let's get into it with today's pod. I can't wait.
All right, let's do it.
Aimee Ross, thank you for joining us. We're in Bentonville with whom I like to call the bike mayor of Bentonville, Aimee Ross. It's great having you. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me. We've been here for 7 years. I worked in that role for 3, stepped away for a little bit, came back into the cycling space about 6 months, 8 months later, supporting a couple different entities, Lifetime, Girls Gone Gravel, did some contract work with Runway. And then over the last couple of years had kind of really delved into more of some of the work that Runway specifically wanted to lean into with really developing the cycling community here from the business side. And then as of recently, I have transitioned over to Trailblazers to help lead this new expanded vision to take some of that work that we were building with partnerships in the cycling industry and all of the cycling philanthropy going forward.
Right. And was 2016, was that a year that things really started getting into gear here for cycling? A lot of people like myself just don't. I have like a vague memory of Bentonville coming up in the conversation, but I don't remember exactly how it happened or when it happened.
Yeah. So timeline kind of really quickly. 2006 was the first trails that were built in Slaughterpin, and a lot of those, it was local advocates just digging away, knew they wanted some mountain bike trails. And then by 2016, They had developed, Slaughter Pin was pretty much developed out. There were still some connectivity pieces that they wanted to add. Blowing Springs existed, that just sits north of here, and Bella Vista. That was about it. And so there was maybe at the time close to 50 miles worth of trail. And we knew that with the amount of attendance we were going to get, we needed more of that. And so they had committed to building out what is now known as the Back 40 in Bella Vista. And I remember coming like every other month, and Gary Vernon would take me out and ride a section of trail. And it was mind blowing how quickly the development was happening. Like they had 6 trail building crews here at one time, all working like on different sections of the trail. And the really cool thing that you see now, I feel like I'm fortunate enough to see that, is that because they were all here together and they had their different sections of trail, they would go out and build that. And then in the evenings, they'd go and ride each other's stuff and then come back. And so you saw this like innovation and trail development happen in real time in a system that was just like all very brand new. And now it's continues to get kind of tweaked, but like I can go out there and ride certain sections and I know which company built what because it's just so familiar. So
That's cool. And you mentioned Gary Vernon, who's, of course, a very good friend of all of ours and has supervised basically all of the trail building here for the last like 15, 20 years.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's worth saying that all this stuff is like really the last 20 years, all of this has happened from zero.
Correct.
It's amazing. How do you explain Bentonville to somebody who's never been here, somebody you know, I don't know, in California or another part of the
Mhm.
country? How do you explain Bentonville and what's so special about this place?
Number one, I think it's like you have to come visit to really understand. You can explain to someone the amount of trails that we have from a connected urban infrastructure. I mean, from the downtown square, you can leave and ride about 200 miles worth of trail, and never really have to get on the road at all between like connected greenways, all the soft surface stuff. And that's not the norm in a lot of places. And so a lot of people can't necessarily like wrap their mind around what does that look like. And then you tell people now, like, fortunately, like the building that we're sitting in, the Ledger, is like the first bikeable building in the world. Like, well, what does that mean? Like, well, there's a ramp that goes up 6 stories. You can ride your bike all the way up it and down. You can ride your bike to your office door. And just the culture, the different pieces that are here, the women's mountain biking group. We have the traditional, like, Tuesday night throwdown road ride that's just really hard. The gravel scene that's continuing to grow and utilizing some of the connected communities in Oklahoma or Missouri. And so it is really hard to tell someone what that really means. And you can describe it all you want. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. Sounds really cool. I've heard a lot about it. I know you guys are also the quote unquote mountain bike capital of the world, something that we self-proclaimed. But it's really like inviting people in. You got to come and see it. And we're here to help curate and guide some of that experience. One of the unique things that we have is all of our trails are very e-bike friendly. So it makes it easy to get around a large amount of the trail system in a short amount of time.
And we're here in a great weekend, beautiful weekend. There's, 2 events that have happened or are happening. If we were here on like a Tuesday in February, how would it be different? I mean, obviously the weather's going to be different, but are people still riding? What is the scene like at sort of a downtime of year?
Yeah. So the other night, I don't know if you guys made it out to the Thunderdome Thriller on Tuesday night they brought the USA National Mountain Bike team out. A bunch of locals signed up, and it's like going head to head on a dual slalom. And like the amount of people I went over there is just insane. Families, kids, adults riding with their kids on the shotgun down it, just a blast. And I had so many people look at me and go, is this like this every day? And I was like, not every day, but kind of. Maybe not to this level. But yeah, like We have a lot of fun here all the time. I've never lived in a place where like literally feel like I have FOMO on something probably at least once a week because there's just so much going on. But in some of the months like February when it can be cold, we do sometimes get snow. But if you're willing to take that opportunity to get outside, like absolutely you can still ride. And there's lots of group rides that happen during those times. A lot of times we get visitors from Minnesota or Michigan that are just like in the throes of winter, like I just need to get away for a little bit and ride my bike. And they'll come down here and, it might be 40 degrees here and it's balming for them, right? They're out riding in shorts and t-shirts while we're all bundled up. Um, but it definitely, I mean, I would say there's not a day that you can't go out and see people out on the trails or the greenway or the gravel roads.
You know, Aimee, you're bringing up something important, which is seeing all locals out. And I know I first came here with you almost 6 years ago, and I remember riding around then. And you really didn't see many other people out on the greenway or the trail. We were kind of in our own group, and that was it. And one of the things I've really seen over the years, I come here a couple times a year, and I was just out like 2 hours ago in Kohler, riding through Kohler, and the number of like families with kids on their Strider bikes and like groups out walking and like people on the big giant stair thing where they're working out. Like, it's incredible to me how the local community has embraced the bike infrastructure. And it's something like I've been to Girona, and that's something you don't really see in Girona. Like the bike people are from out of town, kind of.
Yeah.
They're the tourists.
Sure.
And here, like I just see the locals embracing all of the trails. And I'm wondering, generally speaking, is the local Bentonville community, the people who have maybe been here 40, 50 years, the businesses, the schools, like the people that work at Walmart, are they embracing bikes or not? And how's that going?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. You see a lot more people out now, and like Nat and I always laugh, like Kohler is kind of our backyard. We live in that neighborhood, and I mean, we had been riding it, every day pretty much since we moved here, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden it was like everybody learned about Kohler, whether you're, mom and dad taking a stroll down the greenway or, little kids on their striders, just it's always pretty like busy, especially on that greenway as they make their way to Airship, which is so exciting to see that like these people probably otherwise would have never like really found that and gotten out. And now it's like part of their weekly routine. And then from a broader scale, so Walmart has most certainly embraced it as part of their expansion to this new home office. They created this initiative to encourage to get 10% of their associates commuting to work. And they've hit that number already. There's an initiative over there called the Walmart Move Hub, and they do a lot of programming out of there. And they've really leaned into how do we make it easy and how do we teach our associates to do this. So they have ambassadors within the home office that ride, and they will organize places throughout the community. Like if you live over in Centerton and you want to try to ride to work, but you have no idea how to do it, this person is going to shepherd you. We have bikes that you can check out to do it. You can check it out overnight, take it home. And they've really, really gotten a lot of uptake with that program.
Yeah, and I just want to interrupt here. Walmart has about, I think, 15,000 employees here at the home office. And the goal, I think, was to get 10% of them riding. That's 1,500 people commuting to work every day on their bikes.
Yep.
It's a huge number of Walmart employees here.
Yeah. And then kind of simultaneously with that, there was this momentum created to develop the Bentonville Moves Coalition. And so that's really where a lot of the local community comes together and advocates for better, safer infrastructure. And it's everything from cycling to scooting to walking. There's no active modality that's left out of that. And they work on a lot of things with the community of like organizing some of these rides, helping people, like, again, like they help a lot with the Walmart Move Hub to show people how to do this. They've organized bike buses before. They work with businesses to become more bicycle friendly, and go through that process with the League of American Bicyclists too, to be like certified bike friendly businesses. And then, they work with the local city government and other stakeholders to really bring to the table the needs and wants and help really kind of influence the bike ped master plan as it goes forward in the future, so that they're developing structure that the commuters actually really want and need, and helping to identify where those gaps are in the system. And so it's really cool to see the momentum that they've had, and looking forward to see how much more they do in the near future.
Tom and Stuart Walton are huge cheerleaders for Bentonville and cycling. How important is their boosterism in terms of getting things done, having a big vision? Like, how important are they as people in this movement?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, they are the visionaries behind it all, right? Like they really came in and wanted to see this community become more active, build this urban cycling network, really be known as a cycling destination. That vision hasn't changed. The way that they've helped support it over the years is it's not a linear process at all. It's been a lot varied, and they're very involved and active in it. They share their voice and opinion. There's been times that I've heard, even Tom talk about just like going out riding a new section of trail and like him giving his feedback as a cyclist, like the rest of us, not as someone that's helped from a philanthropic standpoint put that on the ground, but like as someone who just generally loves to ride. And that part is really, really cool to see that it's like, man, we have this great ally within the community. And they're it's it's really neat to see, like, I think about my hometown and the decline in population and what's happened there. And it's like, if I could take the expertise that I have and had all the money in the world to really help, build that out, what would I do? And I would definitely go back there and help them become a community that thrives on outdoor recreation, because the quality of life that has come along with that is just hands down. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like I said, like when we first came here, my husband is a Colorado native, and he's like, I'm going for 1 year and I'm going home. Like, this is just not the place. Like, doesn't have the outdoor stuff. Turn around 7 years. Like he loves it here. I mean, of course, his heart's always in the mountains, but like he generally really appreciates what's here and has the opportunity to get outside in a variety of facets every day.
Great. Aimee, we need to start wrapping it up. I have one last question for you, which is like, where's it going? Where's Bentonville going in the future? What's it going to look like here 3, 5, 10 years? What's coming that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always this like outline of like, okay, what are we missing? What's next? There's always this future of like, what else can we do? And I think probably, in the next year, one of the most exciting things that we have happening is the first of 2 downhill lift serve parks in the community. The Oz Trails Mountain Bike Park will open early summer next year. It's an interesting because it's a 300-foot elevation with a chairlift. But what they've been able to build back on that property is just so, so impressive. The stuff that they've unearthed, and that'll be really exciting. It's a piece of mountain biking in particular that we've kind of been missing. We just don't have that like downhill opportunity, and now that'll open the door. And then in a few years down the road, Mina, which is a few hours south from here, will open their downhill mountain bike park, and that has, I believe, it's 1,200 feet of elevation, so something a little bit more what you would see in the West. But then, additionally, continued great maintenance on the soft surface trails, some continued development for beginner friendly trails, continued development on finding the gaps and filling them in connector trail wise. But the on-street infrastructure in that part is really one of the big pieces going forward. We have the Whole Health Institute that's new now, and the Alice Walton School of Medicine that's new. And there's some additional pieces there that are filling in, and they're really focused on like the whole person and whole health. So like being outside in these sort of safe spaces will also be part of their plan. So it's working with them and the city and the local coalition to help pull it all together to figure out like how do we continue as we grow and expand as an urban destination to get people around by bike much safer. So
Great. Okay. One last question before we log off. Mark, what should we ask her now?
Tell us about your first bike ever.
oh gosh. Well, I learned to ride a BMX bike on my brother's bike before my parents ever bought me one. But I had this when they finally did. I remember it was a pink and white Huffy with pink knobby tires. And I used to take it into the woods all the time and just ride around the house there. And I never really knew what that actually meant, looking back so many years now. I'm not even going to say how many. And I see those pictures and I was like, this is really where it all kind of started. And I wish I still kind of had that bike around just as like, a relic in the garage.
It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Aimee. That's awesome. And thank you. That's
Yeah.
great. So many great thoughts for us.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
You're welcome. Tim Johnson, thank you for joining us. It's great to see you here in Bentonville, and we just want to get your thoughts on where we're at right now. Tim, let me just start by, can you give us your background and what are you doing these days? What's your relationship to bikes? How'd you end up here in Bentonville?
So we put together a trip to come down and we shot it, just a couple guys riding mountain bikes together, talking about the sport. And that was like a, kind of a wow moment. Downtown still had a bunch of, ranches that were small, modest homes. There were only a couple bigger kind of fresh renovations done, but it was just like a very small footprint for cycling. It was strong, but small. And that's where I first met Gary Vernon. That's where, I first got a sense of what was coming. And then after that, I found any excuse I could to come here. Following that was with USA Cycling. I was working on the foundation side, not on the sports side, but when we talked about gravel and the state of gravel, it was in conjunction with the second cyclocross world championships out of Europe, back in Fayetteville in 22 being planned. We had World Cup, cyclocross, World Cup mountain bike, UCI level races planned. It was the first Big Sugar that came out. It was Rule of Three was just getting started. So there were all these other reasons to come. And so after I left USA Cycling, I was with Strava. And again, Strava was just like this really great digital kind of, everlasting network that brought people together from all different types of riding. And wow, it turns out you can do all of those things in Bentonville really easily. But Strava's technology was powering why people were riding, where they were riding, how to create better infrastructure for, people doing these different activities at different times of the day. So all of this stuff, like I've just always found other reasons to come back to Bentonville. And so now I live here. Great community of people, all kinds of different ways that people intersect with the bike industry. And yes, I mean, every day it's like, what's going on? Like, what's next? Who's here? Who's in town? So instead of being on a circus that's traveling around the world as a professional cyclist, it's kind of like the circus comes to town. They show up here. It's nice.
Great. Tim, just give me your opinion, on give me your opinion on like what's happening here. How do you explain Bentonville to somebody who's never been here before? What's your point of view on like what's actually going on here?
Well, that's a very common occurrence. I spent part of the summer in Colorado and Wyoming and places where people have been traveling to for a long time, whether it was skiing or biking in the summer, or you want to spend time in the mountains. A lot of people that don't know Bentonville, the other thing is Arkansas, and then they might have an opinion about Arkansas. I'm from New England. Like, we don't go to the Midwest. Like, we go to the coasts or we go to the mountains, and that's kind of about it. And so I just say to people that there are a few like really, really bright spots in the outdoor and bike world specifically, and Bentonville is the brightest. It's the place where, there are ways in which the bike shows up in day-to-day life that don't exist anywhere else. And if they did, it took 30 years to get there. Like, it happens here all the time. You talk to other people who are kind of players in why, whether it's, anything from the Walton Family Foundation on down, or the companies that are moving here. There's just every corner you look around, it's one of the best examples of that particular type of investment. So the art world, the Crystal Bridges in the US is like not New York City, it's not San Francisco, it's, being built here. You go to, the medical school opening up, or the STEM center, being kind of launched. The bike world is seeing the best investment with the best kind of minds behind each intentional, piece of the puzzle that's being put down, with a timeline way into the future. It's not like, oh shit, we just figured out that everyone likes to ride mountain bikes in Moab. Let's make sure that we can have a place for them to sleep and a few places to eat, and they can have a great photo and go home to back where they live. Now it's like, you come here and you want to come back. You want to keep coming here, or have a business that exists here,
And what is the difference for you between you visited here a lot and then you moved here? How is it different in ways that you expected or didn't expect, being here more or less full time?
Yeah, well, I don't have a family, so it's different. I think that there would be even more reasons to be here if I had a young family and I was trying to figure out how I can match the job I have or the passion I have, in a community that's nice and clean and safe, and people are all having a great life. You see it kind of in the community. It's like I think for me, the most important thing is community. It's the people that I interact with daily, and when I talk to somebody, whether it's in real life at a coffee shop or at an event, I get a lot out of that, and I also get a lot out of sharing that with people who don't have it, or maybe they're busy and they've got things going on. When they get on the bike, they want to really have a good time and enjoy it. It's this kind of place allows that to happen the most often. It's a great catalyst for why we ride bikes in the first place.
Great. Tim, before we wrap up, I just want to ask you about competitive cycling and Bentonville. Obviously, you have a long history with competitive cycling as a professional athlete yourself in multiple disciplines. You worked at USA Cycling. Like, I know how connected you are with professional cyclists around the world. What's the relationship between Bentonville and competitive cycling? How do those two things come together?
Yeah, it's funny because I think the first conversations about how Bentonville can get their name out, the region. Bike racing was always a part of that, but bike racing wasn't necessarily that popular. We had one big stage race in Arkansas, the Joe Martin stage race. We had a couple crits, and they had, some clubs that had road riding, but bike racing wasn't on the calendar and it wasn't international. And so when they started to look at like a flagpole event that could get the name out there, cyclocross was really one of the best and easiest ways to do it, because compared to a road event that would take so much extra money and infrastructure and involvement, what they had here was access to places They had properties that were being managed under, control of the trail building community. And so cyclocross was just like an easy, short, intense, lots of eyeballs, super fun to do, really cool to watch kind of event. And you could bid for the world championships of cyclocross and you might actually get it. And so they did it and they got it. And that just put, Bentonville on live, TV globally, for a couple weeks. And it just made a really great case for why. Following that up with mountain biking and, the different events, the Big Sugar that we're at, this weekend. I think it's always like a subtext that's always there. You don't have to be competitive though to be a bike rider. And so you always need to have a balance of it. It's not just about bike racing here, it's about bike riding. And as a cyclist, as a competitive cyclist, I would always take, I would always get turned off by people who are too competitive. They took the racing too seriously and they made it so exclusive because the language is different. Not many people can ride 100 miles, like all these different ways to make that club really small. And I'd be like, guys, what are you doing? Like this, we need more people who actually like to ride. Why not find other ways to do this? And so I was always kind of naturally attracted to that anyways. And so I think that the bike racing side of things is here, but it's not the only thing that's here. So that's really attractive to me.
Great. Normally our question would be about your first bike, but since you had such a long career racing and I'm such a dork about vintage bikes, what was your favorite race bike? Like of all the teams you were on, was there something that just sticks in your mind of like you wish you still had it or maybe you do still have it?
Yeah, I am not a bike geek, really. I mean, I've kind of avoided like getting too deep into the technological side of why bikes work, because I was always told that the bike I was on was the best bike, and that's it. Like if a kid, especially as a young racer, had a better bike, that didn't mean that they were going to beat me because I had to be the one to do it, not the bike. Yeah. And I know there was a book. We're not going to talk about it, but so I have two bikes that are my favorite that really stand out. One was a cyclocross bike made at independent fabrication in Boston. It's like handmade. It was steel. It was Columbus tubing. I think we had two. There was one that was like Columbus Foco. But this was like a 19-pound steel cyclocross bike. It was basically like riding, a can of tuna down the course, which made it really nice and soft and, responsive. But it also had the best paint job ever. Like,
they were good. Their paint jobs were amazing.
Paint jobs were amazing. And it was so good that after I used it one season, I had two of them. After I used it the first season, we just repainted it in the red, white, and blue because I became national champion. And then I used it the season after that. So I did 3 seasons on a bike. You're only supposed to do 1. And then we painted those Le Mans even. So the same bike became 3 different types of bikes. And I still have it. And then the other one was the first carbon titanium Le Mans,
right,
when I was on Saturn. And so that was a road bike. And it was just like killer looking, rode really well, was light but not too light.
Best geometry. Le Mans bikes, best geometry.
Yeah, it really was. So yeah, I still have both of those.
Love it.
Tim, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for sharing all your thoughts about Bentonville. We really appreciate it. Scott King, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here, and we're looking forward to hearing your point of view on what's happening in Bentonville. So just to start off, can you just give us a short version about your background and how you ended up here in Bentonville?
Sure. Well, I'm Scott King, Chief Experience Officer at Runway Group. I came here through product design. I was working for a firm called Frog Design based out of Austin. And we were doing some work for one of the family investments, Arvest, and a lifelong cyclist. Of course, early on in the conversation with Tom and Stuart about banking, we start talking about bikes and roll the tape forward. Next thing you know, I'm working for them as a consultant. with my original assignment was, what's next? What do we do next? And a lot of my work at Frog Design in design consulting was particularly around strategy, the convergence of strategy, technology, and design, and a lot of growth strategy. And so the question of what do we do next with what we have, or what do we need to add to a portfolio, was a core question that I was familiar with working on. So for the first year or so for them as a consultant, I really focused on trying to create a series of design briefs about what's next in cycling. And originally it was a 5-year horizon that eventually ended at a 10-year horizon that eventually were like, oh, this is more of a 15. Oh, this is a 20-year horizon kind of thing.
And what timeline was this? What year was it when you first came here? And
Yeah,
what
great
was
question.
the state of like cycling in Bentonville?
That was, I left Frog Design in February of 2020. I had been there for not quite 10 years, and I was ready to go back out on my own. And in retrospect, I'd say I left one of the best jobs for one of the best firms in the world doing product design at the beginning of a global pandemic. And it was either the smartest thing I did or the dumbest thing I did. So it worked out to be pretty smart, I think. So it was 2020. Yeah.
So, Scott, give us the overview. Like, you've been working obviously for 5 years now on the planning here. Where are we? Where's it going? Like, what is happening in Bentonville according to the planning you did? How's that going? And where are we? Give us the context.
Well, there's a number of design briefs that kind of set some visions, and some of those sparked other things in response to that vision. And one in particular, which is my core work right now, has been for the last year or so, is Austral's bike park. So one of the things we identified in that visioning process was a lift-served gravity park. And some people had been imagining that maybe for 3 years beforehand, but it hadn't been coalesced anything that was actionable. So the first thing we did was put it in that shape. And then that sat for a little bit on the shelf while other things were happening that were in response. So there were a number of things that popped up in response to those design briefs that we picked off and started working on as well. But where we are in relation to that design brief is a handful of those we're working on, the bike park being one of them. There's a lot of stuff that's more infrastructure related that we're working on as well, like on the street infrastructure in terms of making it a better community to ride a bike in for utility, not just recreation. And then a number of things in hospitality space as well. So hotels and things like that are being done that were part of that original piece. And then some just larger real estate development that goes along with these amenities that you build and then you kind of develop around it. So we're on the way. We're some things that we thought we would have done by now, we haven't started because they took back priority to other things that came up, and things that popped up along the way we're working on. And the bike park is kind of full bore right now. So,
I've been here probably for the last 5 years, once a year. And last year, my feeling was Bentonville's kind of done. Like, it seems like it's done. Like, all the good stuff's picked off, and like they're kind of like at a plateau. And then I went to a conference, and at the conference, the governor's husband was giving a speech and said, we're going to double the population in this area, I think by 2030. But it was a big claim, and it really got on my radar of like, they're just getting started.
Yep.
Maybe you could talk about what does it look like over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so Brian Sanders is a huge advocate for cycling, and he believes in the transformative power of the bicycle, as we do as well. We think that more people on bikes is better than less people on bikes. And so the bicycle, he's a believer, right? I think probably some of the things he's referring to would be around recreation. So it's been talked about a little bit in the last couple of days about more of what we've done in Bentonville and other communities around Arkansas, more trail in state parks, more activation of those trails in state parks. So helping people know that these assets are out there, these gems, if you will. And then, like, for instance, a big one would be the bike park that we built in Mena, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. So that's about 2 hours south of here. We think that the two bike parks are better together, the one in Bentonville and the one in Mena, than if you just built one by themselves. So that's another piece of that'll come.
That's like having a like Whistler and Blackcomb in one area, or a ski town maybe with a few ski areas.
Whistler and Blackcomb are probably, it's an interesting example. A more accurate one might be Summit County, where you have they're close, but they're not like you're going to ski Copper and
Right.
Keystone on the same day.
Right.
But a customer, a guest would say, I'm going to go to Summit County this year. And okay, well, this year we're going to go to Arapahoe Basin because last year we went to Breckenridge.
Right.
So one of our early kind of ahas in that visioning process was, okay, we need bike parks in Arkansas. And we were inspired by a number of things that were going on. And the idea was, or the aspiration was, at some point somebody goes, I think I'm going to go for a bike vacation this year. Where are we going to go? We'll go to Arkansas. Well, where did we go last year? Well, last year we went to Mena. Let's go to Bentonville this year. Or we'll stop in Bentonville first, and then we'll go to Mena second, or we'll go to Horseshoe Canyon Ranch, which is a little bit to the east. So the point is like you raise the awareness of the whole state, and the consideration set is no longer just like one thing, but the whole thing, and then you start honing in from there. So it's kind of like a community that has a lot of restaurants in one neighborhood versus one restaurant in the neighborhood.
Right. Scott, you talked about Horseshoe Canyon, you talked about Mena. There's a lot of outdoor recreation in Arkansas, particularly in the northern half of the state, I think. And, we're in the Ozark Mountains. Can you just speak a little bit to the amount of outdoor, there's water sports there. I mean, there's a lot going on here that I think people outside of Arkansas are maybe not aware of how much cool outdoor recreation is here. I know it's been surprising for me personally, and I love coming here, and I'm like an outdoor sports freak. So can you just speak to some of what's going on here?
Yeah, it's surprising, I think, for a lot of folks. I think climbing, some of the best climbing on this side of the Rockies. Horseshoe Canyon Ranch would be a great example of that. The event there, 24 Hours of Horseshoe Hill, a lot of people have heard of. But the rock climbing there and in that whole zone is amazing. The water and canoeing, kayaking, Buffalo River is a national river. It's the first one of its kind. It's an amazing asset for the state and the U.S. Trail running is growing a lot. It's amazing to watch trail running grow because it makes total sense. You build a great cross country network. It's great to run on too, and so that's happening. Cycling, of course, and in the cycling, people ask all the time, like, what do you ride more mountain bike or you ride more gravel? It's like, man, we ride all the wheels. I mean, I think a lot of the community here doesn't really think of themselves as a mountain biker or a gravel cyclist. Just like, what are we riding today, kind of thing. And then those things start to mash up. But events like the Rule of Three, where you're doing single track and gravel and road, one event, one bike, and it's just, and to a certain degree, it's a little bit not following the patterns that other communities do, but just doing what we do.
From the outside, it looks like you have in Bentonville and Northwest Arkansas, you have the political will, you have access to capital, and you have, to a certain degree, the local people behind making cycling bigger. Are there things that have been challenges that you didn't expect or that don't seem obvious from the outside in order to build what you've built here?
Oh, I think the challenges are probably very similar challenges that other communities have. They appear in a slightly different way. I was having a conversation before I came over here this morning with some journalists out at the bike park, and we were just talking about land access. And as you start to look at it, the access to land is always a challenge, right? It just presents itself in a way that's particular to that area. Mm-hmm. For us, for instance, if you look at the Back 40 and the Little Sugar networks, those are all on owners association property, right? So they're on private property. So there was a deal that had to be done to give access to that private property to the public. That's not too dissimilar to maybe Kingdom Trails. Yeah. Kingdom Trails was just a number of different owners
in Vermont.
In Vermont, correct. So my point is I think we probably have similar challenges. It's just they present themselves in slightly different ways. One of the things that we do a lot is benchmark with other communities. So for the bike park, for instance, I visited bike parks all over the country to figure out what was working and how it was working. We've done that same thing, whether we're talking about on the street connectivity, single track, gravel. So we study a lot of other communities. And then we invite a lot of other communities to come. And if somebody wants to come and have a conversation with us about how something was working, we're an open book. We love to be a laboratory for other communities. It's true that we do have, patient capital in a way that some do not. But that doesn't mean that what we're doing can't work somewhere else. I think two important things to think about with regards to that. One, I think that we've shown if you put trail where people live, you will grow the number of riders, right? The fact that for a long time to mountain bike, you had to put your bike on your car and drive 20 miles or 30 miles to a trailhead that was probably a very expert trail. That doesn't grow the sport, right? It provides a good, riding an IMBA Epic is amazing, but it's not growing the sport.
Yeah.
But if you put trail where people are, then you're more likely to engage people right after work or right after school, even if it's just a 30-minute ride or an hour ride. And then
We're going to get coffee.
are going to get coffee, right? So,
Yeah. We, Scott, we interviewed Amanda Carey, the CEO of Nike, a couple weeks ago, and she made the exact same point about high schools like that are in more urban or landlocked areas, not up next to some great mountain bike area. She said we have to bring the trails to the schools.
exactly. So that's my point with that. And I should circle back to it is you can do that even if you don't have a benefactor who has a lot of money. The idea is the principle can be applied in your community, right? Similarly, building trails, at least part of your trails that are really focused on the beginner experience, anybody can do. Building trails that are designed to teach progression, anybody can do. Right, so those are all kind of lessons that we learned in this lab that we love to share with other communities because we know those can be applied regardless.
For people who are going to come to Bentonville who haven't been here, I was texting with somebody yesterday who's at a mountain bike outlet, and they've never been here. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are some of the secrets to like making the most of a trip to Bentonville and making sure that you hit there's so many trails that it's a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah,
So what advice do you have?
It is, and I'll be honest. I think one of the places that we struggle a little bit, and we can always do better. I mean, that's one of our things. Jendai says it really well at People for Bikes. We can always do better. For us, one of the things we can do better is help people with trip planning and wayfinding. And I would encourage anybody right now, if they were going to come look, I mean, YouTube is full of great point of view content from all the trail systems. Trailforks is actually a really, really great asset right now to kind of understand what's out there. So, if you go to visit Bentonville's website and you go to oztrails.com website, those two are good planning. But then it's going to be a matter of getting in and just trying to understand, okay, what network do I want to start with? Mm-hmm. I would never hesitate to recommend somebody find a guide to help them through the area. Our system, you might have heard this term, is particularly in slaughter pen area, we call it a stacked loop system. So if a hill, the bottom of the hill, there's a trail system. The middle of the way up the hill is another trail system. And at the top is another trail system. So you can kind of ride the hillside in a number of different ways. A local rarely just rides around one or the middle or the top, but they're doing something that kind of connects them all together. And that's hard to communicate in the planning process. That's easier once somebody shows you, oh, you connect this to that, to this, to that. And then that's really the magic ride. We don't yet do a really good job helping an outsider see those. Yeah. That's more of a locals, and a guide sometimes helps with that.
Scott, you brought up the idea of progression, and of course I have mountain biked a lot here, and I'm a desperately mediocre mountain biker myself. But one of the things that really I'm so impressed with is you have all these, like a skills park, and you can be doing a pretty gnarly jump run, but there's a sort of a bailout on the right of every double jumps that there's an easy way down. So two people have different skill levels. Totally. And so I feel like it's really ideal to learn the sport of mountain biking, which is way more skill intensive than a lot of people understand. Tell me about the idea of like having a whole progression from beginner to advanced.
There's a couple points here to unpack. One is, we'll just start with the progression one. We like to build trails so that multiple skill levels can ride the same trail, because it's more fun to ride with a group of people, generally speaking, if you're particularly on a holiday, than by yourself. And you want to ride with the people you came with usually. So isn't it great when you can go and multiple levels can experience their ride their own ride, but you're still together. So a beginner trail might have some great side hits that, an intermediate or expert rider has fun on riding as well. Or there's a great trail in Kohler, which is where the cafe is, you might have been to. It's called Family Flow. And it's a flow trail designed for families. Interestingly enough, the name like that. The cool thing about family flow is a pure beginner can ride it and have a good time, or a family can ride it together and have a good time. But there might be an expert rider in that family who will see a double jump, or they'll even see a triple jump, or they'll see a side hit into another berm that it opens up once you have the skill level, but it doesn't keep a beginner from having a good time there. So the trail is designed to run at one speed, but if you run it at race pace, it opens up a whole nother layer of kind of like features that you might not see. So that kind of idea is kind of underpins progression as you take a trail, and sometimes it's the ride around, but sometimes it's just like little hidden jumps, little side hits that make it fun for everyone. So there's a way you design trail to do that applies kind of across the whole network. And by the way, that we're taking all those lessons and applying them at the Oztrails Bike Park. But the other thing you talked about was the skills area. And I think something that's really important on that is we saw this happen in a number of different areas around the country. A great example is the Frisco Bike Park. If you ever go in Summit County, it's the Frisco Bike Park. Great example of a jump line that has from pure beginner to, Red Bull size features on the left. And most of that park gets used to the right, the beginners and intermediates. But the big line on the side is like this aspiration, right? So two things that are going on there. One, you realize you've got a series of jumps that you can progress through as you work your way up. But two, you can see, oh, if I work hard, if I train, if I put the time under task, I can make this next step. So having that in your line of sight is really important. For us, we have a skills park that we built in Slaughterton Phase 1 that was around very similar thinking. The last piece to mention on that is we found that teaching some of these skills, learning some of these skills are easier when you can isolate a variable, right? So to learn to jump on a trail in the woods is harder than to learn to jump than if you just have a jump. Right. You have things going past you. You've got different surfaces. You've got berms. You've got all this stuff going on that keeps you from concentrating on that one thing you're trying to learn. So isolating the move, whether it's a jump or a drop or pumping or berms in a skills park, and then scaling that out into the wild, that's a key unlock for learning. So that idea of learning areas and then you scale it out onto the trail is something we embrace as well.
Amazing.
Peter and I both work with a lot of brands, and this week while I'm here, just like every time I've been here, I get texts from the people that we work with saying, what's going on? What should we be doing there? They're trying to figure it out. What advice do you have for companies in the bike industry and beyond who are trying to figure out what to do in Bentonville? Are there resources here, people they should contact? Like, what's the best way to kind of get their head around it?
Thanks for asking that question. So I mentioned earlier that we uncovered some things along the way that became priorities over some of the things in that original vision. One of those is the business development process around the cycling industry. So myself and Aimee Ross over the last couple of years have been focused on a business development process for the cycling industry that has really been intentional in terms of how do we go tell the story to the industry to come and join us here in Bentonville. And we kind of developed a thesis that had some ideas behind it, and then we've gone about telling that story out in the world. And that work is really focused on helping the industry realize this is not only a great place to come and visit, but a great place to do business. And there's kind of 4 areas that we focused on that we think are smart business reasons to be here. The first would be you see it expressed through flagship stores or experience centers, right? So a place for a brand to have a location for someone to engage with that brand kind of in situ, if you will, for what their product is. So RE or YT are Specialized, unfortunately, and they closed theirs, but they were one of the first ones. Mm-hmm. So that's that kind of experience center. Because we have so many people who come from all over the country, you can ride 12 months of the year, and because of different riding styles, it's a great place to showcase your product, right? So that's one. Second one would be related to that, but slightly separate, which would be product development. So because of the same terrain, because of the riding, it's a great place to do foundational research. I've got an idea. I want to go meet with some customers to test some responses or maybe to study them to figure out what their pain points are. Or I want to do evaluative research. I've got a prototype and I want to test it behind kind of in a massed way with just my development team, or maybe I want to take it to customers. So product development that's the second one. So experience, product development. The third kind of pillar of the thesis would be really around attract and retain talent.
Mm-hmm.
So the back of the house, if you will, for a brand, customer service, sales, quality, finance, accounting, all those things that, as we all know in the cycling industry, primarily employs passionate cyclists.
Yep.
It's easier to do that in a place where you've got plenty of places to ride,
yeah.
right? And so we've had a lot of people who are interested in having some presence here because it's easy to attract and retain talent.
Yep.
And then the fourth one would be around the product itself, which starts with distribution, then eventually will lead us to assembly, and then eventually to manufacturing.
Right.
So center of the country, we're in the UPS parlance, we're zone 2 from anywhere in the country. I would also point out that because of the surrounding ecosystem of Walmart and JB Hunt, we probably have more expertise in supply chain and logistics, talent, capital, and technology than anywhere else in the country. So we believe this eventually will become a major distribution point for the industry as well.
Great. Scott, before we would wrap up, I just want to ask you about this week. We're here between the Little Sugar mountain bike race and the Big Sugar gravel race. There's the Shift conference here this week. All these people from the industry come in. I mean, I would say for me personally and professionally, is one of my favorite weeks of the year because I've got so many friends here. You see everybody every day around town. Everybody is very accessible and everybody's connected by bikes. Tell me about why this week is important on the kind of, business and bicycle landscape.
Well, kudos to Chemo and the Lifetime team for seeing it early on and having and making a bet with Big Sugar. I think Christy is probably the one that we could give credit for the idea to have a gravel race here, Christy Moan. But anyway, the Lifetime team has seen the vision, and eventually the idea was, wait a minute, we have the Sea Otter that kicks the season off. We have Big Sugar race at the end. What if we added another event to it to extend that kind of moment, which started as a Little Sugar, and then the Runway team and Lifetime has spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, what does that look like for the end of the season event, and how do we make it a special place for the industry and for consumers to come, and customers and guests and riders and athletes to come and experience between Little Sugar and Big Sugar. And I think this year the energy is more than there was last year, which was more than the year before. And I can't say what yet, but Chemo and I were talking on Sundays, like, what if we did this? What if we did this? So there's still ideas percolating about how there's more to come on that. So I guess it's kudos to the Lifetime team.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say as someone who's worked with you on the idea of bringing bike brands here, this is a really important week for kind of building community among the bike industry and like sharing ideas. I've had, 100 conversations with people. What do you think about that? Do you think, what are they doing over there? What do you think? What are you doing back? There's like a lot of like brainstorming and creative jamming going on. Scott, before we wrap up, we want to ask you, I know you love bikes. Obviously you love your equipment. I want you to tell me about the favorite bike you've ever had. That could be going back to when you were 5 years old or up till now. What's your favorite bike?
That's like asking what my favorite motorcycle is. If I had to pick a single favorite bike, it probably has the least amount of time on it because I only rode it for very specific things. It was a Rock Lobster cyclocross race bike.
Great.
That Paul, when we were talking before he built it, he said, "What do you want?" I was like, "I want a race bike." And he goes, "So you want a step?" I was like, "I want a race bike." He was like, "Okay, I'll build your race bike." So it shows up. But before that, he said, "You want to put water bottle cages on, water bottle bosses on?" I was like, might as well. Maybe I'll use it for some point. So I like put them on there, right? I'm not going to put a water bottle on there, but put the bosses on there. So it shows up, no bosses on it. And I called him. I was like, "It's a race bike, right?" And he goes, "It's a race bike."
Yeah.
That bike was so stiff and it was not fun to ride anything other than full bore, all out. And when you did, it was just magic, man. It's just like, okay, this is what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So that was one of my favorite bikes.
What color was it?
Oh, see, it was Seafoam Green. Yeah, it was
bike.
exactly team
Yeah.
bike.
Beautiful. Scott King, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all
Yep.
your thinking with us. That's great. We love learning from you. Thank you.
Yep. Good luck.
All right. That was awesome getting to hear from our Bentonville experts while we were in Bentonville in the Ledger building. So, we've had an amazing and interesting week here. Mark, I learned so much this week, new things, new insights. Mark, tell me what you saw this week in Bentonville.
A lot of stuff going on. I'd say it was bigger than any of the years I've been there, for sure, in terms of industry turnout, and riders and people and their supporters, etc. We got lucky with the weather until Saturday, but I left on Friday, so it worked perfectly for me. Amazing riding, as always. The weather was the light was beautiful, the gravel was perfect, like amazing riding. And we did get to see a lot of friends from People for Bikes. Had a great event that we went to, mainly on Thursday. That was really helpful for the industry to get a snapshot of what's going on in the industry. And I took away some pretty interesting information about the growth or lack of growth in the business right now. We also saw our buddies from USA Cycling who are really getting fired up for LA 2028, and we're doing some great work with them. And hopefully we can talk about that in a future episode. And we saw just a bunch of friends from people like Scott, Vittoria, Strider Bikes, of course, the folks at Allied, and just a range of industry. If you're in the business, if you're listening to this, book your Airbnb for next year because you don't want to miss it. It's like Sea Otter in October. So be there.
Yeah, Mark, I love this. This is my favorite week of the year in bikes. And I tell people that when I'm down there this week, the lines between work and fun for me are very blurry because I'm down there to race Big Sugar, which I love doing gravel races. And then, of course, there are so many meetings. I hosted the Breakfast Club up from Austin, Texas. We led a panel discussion. We led a shakeout ride and just connected with so many people in the business. It was great. And I'm already, you and I have talked about the interesting podcast that we're going to have in the future based on the people that we met. So I'm very excited for that. So I'll share with you, I have 3 insights, okay, based on my time in Bentonville. Just like I spend a lot of time just kind of walking around and paying attention, trying to like hover at 10,000 feet and kind of connect the dots, what I'm seeing. 3 things are, I think the most important sort of marketing strategy in sports equipment right now, whether it's running or tennis or golf or bikes, is community and managing and growing a community. And you can see like gravel bikes, the gravel racing has really done that. I would also say that the bicycle brands, I think, are lagging way behind other industries like running. Nike is building all these different fitness, strength, and running centers around the world. Golf startups are really leveraging community. Different running brands like Bandit and Tracksmith and Satisfy are all doing interesting community management things. And I think the bicycle industry has long ago outsourced community management to their retailers. And I think the retailers are not great at that. So you go to an event like Big Sugar, there's almost no interesting community gatherings built around bike brands, whether it's Trek or Specialized or Cervelo or Canyon. I didn't see any of that. And I think in some ways it's disappointing to me. I think they could just be doing so much better.
And they're good at product marketing, but when it comes to building brand, building community, I think they struggle because they have a hard time tying it to sales, which for them is sort of the ultimate metric.
Right. And I just don't think brand initiatives and community, they don't correlate directly with sales. You can't say, hey, look, we spent $100,000. What did we sell based on? It doesn't connect that easily. The other thing I saw was a lot of brands struggling to tell a brand story. Like I think there are a lot of bike brands that have been around for a long time, and sort of like the community thing, I just feel like they're lagging behind other kind of innovative sports brands that are telling a really interesting story, even in the cycling space. I think the most interesting brands right now are probably on the apparel side, whether it's historically, Rafa has done interesting stuff. I think MAP is doing some interesting stuff, Panormal Studios.
Yeah.
I just don't see generally the brands doing interesting things. And I spoke to a young sort of prominent cyclist, and I was like, are there any bike brands that you see that are just really interesting to you? He says, no, there's not one. And I found that to be, he's 30 years old. So I found that to be very interesting. I mean, what do you think, Mark?
Well, I think we talked about this, that one of the problems is the bike sales of bikes is a very low margin business compared to a lot of other businesses. And that makes it difficult for brands to invest in building brand and building community because they don't feel like they have the margin to put against it. You could counter me and say, well, companies like Specialized have multiple World Tour teams and all kinds of racers. They could invest some of that money into building community and building brand. But I think the lever that they like to pull is the best riders on the bikes make them the best bikes. And we had a call with somebody today who is not going to have a World Tour team next year, and they're very nervous about how they're going to replace the awareness and the visibility that the team gives them. And I think that just demonstrates how much the industry is kind of stuck in a rut of, sponsoring pros and kind of all doing the same things, trying to keep up with each other.
Yeah, I think you're making a good point that there's sort of this expected path for bike brands, and I would say they don't necessarily have to do it that way. So the last thing I noticed, as I mentioned, I raced in the Big Sugar gravel event, which got shortened on the morning of the race from 100 miles down to 50. That's fine. It just took off super hot and super fast, even in our age group field. It was out of the gate ripping. And, I've been riding gravel races since 2017 when I first did Belgian Waffle Ride. I would say generally gravel races are unnecessarily dangerous, in my opinion. They run a lot mostly on open roads, even if it's gravel roads. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a gravel race for years in different races, whether it's SBT, Belgian Waffle Ride, Big Sugar, and you're in a pace line of like 15 people. You're in the middle, and you look up, and you're all the way on the left side of the road, going around a blind left-hand corner on an open gravel road. If a car was coming the other way on their right side of the road, it would be an absolute catastrophe and multiple people could die. And that happens like honestly all the time in gravel races. There's a lot of time when you're on like the paved road before you get to the start of the race, kind of the neutral start, but it's not that neutral. You're going 25 miles an hour. You have 150, 200 people jammed on one side of a small road, trying to keep on the right side of the yellow line. All it would take is like two bikes to fall over in the path of an oncoming car on the other side. It would be a catastrophe. The other thing I find is a lot of times this happened on Saturday at Big Sugar. You come out of the gravel and you got to cross a paved road, which is open to traffic. They should have police, 2 cops holding traffic so a bunch of bikes can go by without having to stop. There were 3 or 4 crossings where there were no cops. And I just, in a gravel race, you're exhausted. You can't count on bike racers to do the safe and sensible thing in a race. Of course, they're not going to do that. I mean, in the group rides here in LA, I see so much incredibly dangerous behavior on a group ride. It's not even a race. And so I think gravel races are in some ways, it's like playing Russian roulette, and I find them to be kind of a ticking time bomb. There have already been some deaths, like at that race in Vermont a couple years ago, from this kind of thing. So I just wish they would generally take safety a lot more seriously.
Yeah, agreed. And when it's a race and you pin a number on, you just think differently. Not blaming anybody, but I do the same thing. was doing it last year in the same event of riding the gravel downhill super fast, thinking it wasn't open to cars, but it was. The only thing I wanted to add, just a final point, was it's really interesting to see how bike brands are trying to have a presence in Bentonville. And we saw Specialized had this beautiful store that was part demo, part sales. It didn't have a real clear purpose, and now that store is gone, unfortunately. But we're seeing other brands that are trying to maybe be a little more nuanced and a little more subtle. Scott opened an adventure lab, which is sort of a demo and rental location that's in the Motto Hotel. Looks really interesting and cool, and it's run by some industry veterans who really know how to do that. And the thing I really liked was Allied. It's Allied's hometown. They could have the biggest shop in town if they wanted to, but they just had a little presence in the Meteor bike shop, and it seemed really clever and not a high dollar output presence, but one where I think everybody who rides goes to that shop. So it's interesting to me to see how this will evolve, because I don't think, as much as Bentonville is a bike town, I think it's hard to support a great shop year round because the winter is probably somewhat, slow.
Yeah. And the brand Ari, it used to be Fazari, now it's called Ari. They just opened a shop there. And yeah, I agree. I rented a Scott e-mountain bike one day from Ernie at the Adventure Lab. And, it's Bentonville is evolving quickly, as we talked about on the pod. Things are changing. It's growing. I think brands are trying to figure out the best way to show up there. And, there was Allied had a factory there, which they've now moved most of the manufacturing out of Bentonville. But they're like, I think it's not yet set in stone what the right activation setup for a bike brand in Bentonville is. Like, that's all being figured out in real time. But I would just say in general, there's so much bike infrastructure between all the unbelievable bike trails, like 600 miles, the gravel, the bike themed cafes like the Meteor, the bike lanes in town, bike racks everywhere. I mean, there's just no place like it in North America, honestly. It's year round. You could say a place like, I don't know, Whistler, Canada has, a lot of mountain bike stuff. Yeah, 3 months a year, but it's a ski town, really.
Right.
Let's be clear.
Yep.
So this is like a ski town for bikes. Okay, Mark, that was a great discussion. This was a great episode. And
great trip.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And we'll talk to you on the next one, okay?
You got it, Peter. Thank you.